again, thank you for putting your energy and your intellect and your youth into something like this. When I was in school here at UT, I never thought of anything that serious, so I really appreciate that about you all. It is a very interesting path when you set out and befriend someone who is behind bars. Gloria is an expert at it. This was my first time, and I went at it with just, this would be an interesting thing to do. I'm a writer, and I thought, okay, it's something, I was against the death penalty. It was a part of a step of showing I'm against the death penalty, but also my writer curiosity. And their statement about the mystery, that was there for a long time with me. I always kept this 5% in the back of my brain that was, did Todd start the fire? What happened? Who started the fire? There was always this question up until the very end when I received the last letter from him. And I was in the hospital at the time. My daughter read it. And when she read the letter, it just was almost this aha moment of, I know he's innocent now. There was always that question. My experience with David Martin was, he did treat me like I was, an idiot. Like, at one point in the interview, he said, if he ever got out, he would be a danger to society. So I think he took it in his mind, and other people did too, that, this is a jailhouse romance. So you have to be prepared for a lot of reactions to your efforts. Suspicion, what are you in it for, what you don't know what you're talking about. So for me, there's many levels of your activism. It can be just in support of these people who are under just unbelievable living conditions. They're talking about Bradley Manning now and how he's being tortured and left alone for 23 hours a day. That's death row. They are alone for 23 hours a day, let out for an hour, allowed a shower, and the term is recreating in a cage like a dog with another person recreating. That's their only contact. It's not like the television image of jail where they're hanging out on the bars, talking to people, watching television. They've taken away their art supplies. It's inhumane. So that fueled a lot of my passion. But I can tell you, I'm just reading from my journal. I just found this journal, and as this is going along, there was a tremendous amount of confusion. I said here, tomorrow will be the last opportunity to visit with Todd before I read the court transcripts. The lawyers say that Todd and his parents make a compelling case that he didn't commit this horrible crime. Could a man set his children on fire? So these are the sort of things that you're going to be dealing with, the intellectual but also emotional issues. After reading the transcripts, having read the transcripts of the trial, things don't look so good for Todd, although I don't think I would have convicted him. So there was this just step-by-step process of finding things and learning more as you go along. And for me, being a writer, the only way I could deal with the emotion was I wrote a play about it, because you want to help, you want to do something, and it takes. I have essays here that I've written, tried to get published. There's just a lot of frustration, like you're hitting your head against the wall. Who could I get to help? And the big irony of this case is that it took a writer with the skills like David Grann and the cachet of the New Yorker to bring this story to the surface, because it's not that people weren't trying to get attention, but you may write a wonderful article, but you may submit it and no one will look at it, or they're not interested, or it's not the right time. So have courage and keep up the faith, because it will be a long, grueling haul, whatever you're working on. One of the most painful things for me is to see on this film too is to see the governors talk about what a monster Todd was, because Todd was not a monster, he was a man. And to me, even if a person has committed a crime and they're incarcerated, they're still a human being. And in theory, we're supposedly this Judeo-Christian nation, but there's not any sense of redemption about the criminal justice system. And whether you go at it from a spiritual approach or just a purely legalistic point of view, no human being deserves to be treated like an animal. I never could say he did or he didn't do it, but I knew no one deserved to be treated this way. Let me just read, I'm just going to read an excerpt from something that he wrote to me. I would send him poetry, or I would send him, he would ask me to send him things, and this was a particular poem I had written about my father and how I would steal the change off of my father's dresser. And so he said, I like the little thing about your father's change. You know, when I was small, I used to do something a little like that. When my father would come home from work at night and he would be sitting in his recliner, I used to come up to him and pat his leg where the change was. He would then pull all his change out of the pocket and hold it out in his hand, and I would happily pick the pennies from his change. He does not remember this, and that bothers me, because to me that was a big thing. I also remember on Tuesday nights until I was 10 or 11, my father bowled in a league and was also the president of the Bowling Association in Ardmore. I would sit at home with my mom and watch Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Three's Company, and Soap. When Soap came on, I knew my pop would be home soon. When he would pull in the drive, I would run to the back door and wait. When he came in, I would grab his bowling bag and lug it to the closet where he kept it. 9 years later, I used that same bowling bag as my own when my pop and 3 other men won a tournament. But I also remember the smell of him then, the cold air outside, the smells of the bowling alley in his clothes. I do know I am boring you with this, but your story of the change pushed these memories to my fingers. I was a pretty good bowler too, could roll 200 steady. I was what they called a Brooklyn bowler. I struck the head pin on the wrong side. So this is a person, it's a human being, and he has memories. And he lost his wife, and he lost his children, and he lost his life. And to me, that's what's important about this film is Governor Perry is very good at pushing this information under the table and not keeping it out. So the more we're active, the more films, the more articles, the better we'll be. And who knows how many Todds there are, and who knows how many people's lives you can affect. One thing that kept me going was, Todd could be a very arrogant person, he could be a very irritating person, he could be egotistical, but he was, in my mind, a person who I befriended, and he really counted on that friendship and that support. The frustration for me at the end was and I have been asked to write a memoir about this whole experience, and I haven't been able to write on it, and I think it's because at some place on an unconscious level, I had agreed that I would be there at the execution. And on some level, I realized this is going forward, and it's not going to be stopped, and I am going to be there. And I even remember when I contacted Gerald Hurst, he said, in Texas, you have to be almost a poster boy to get out of jail. And so there will come times when you will be very challenged to, deal with this emotionally and intellectually. And for me, it was a very difficult journey. And watching the films now makes me realize how important you are, because I had no idea. When Gloria approached me on the bus and said, "Do you want to write someone on death row?" I said, "Sure." I didn't know it would lead to this. I didn't know it would lead to David Grann calling. I didn't know this film would happen, the Nightline thing happened, but it did. And so you never know what your small, insignificant acts and desires will bring about. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes?
I work at a theater, and I was wondering what the name of your play is, and if we could purchase the rights to it.
Oh, yeah. I did it as part of Diverse Works. I had a residency there. It's called Release Yearning. And I would love to have a second production. We had a production in town, and I've been looking to do some more, to do some rewrites and have a second production.
Okay, yeah, we're actually based out of Los Angeles.
Great.
But we're doing, right now the play is called La Razón Blindada, Armored Reason. It's a play inspired by the stories of political prisoners in the 70s in Argentina, where they are only allowed 1 hour of human contact a week on Sundays. And so they meet across the table and they tell each other the story of Don Quixote. They act it out to save themselves. And I think that it would be in line with what
Yeah.
the theater produces.
Anything you could do, whether it's theater or letters or there was a wonderful, brilliant piece of theater where they actually had the exonerated reading the letters of the exonerated. I don't know if you guys have seen that. And I think it's called the exonerated.
Yeah.
But powerful way of getting the information out. Some people can hear art, hear a subject matter in an art experience that they can't in a political experience, and vice versa.
It's important to capitalize on things when you say that.
Right, in any manner. I mean, what they're doing is phenomenal. The first time I came up here and I met, an exonerated person, it was like, oh my gosh, this could have been Todd, this can really happen.
Yeah.
So it's heartening to see you to know that it's possible. Possibility keeps humans going.
Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. He would have been with us. This would have been
Right.
great. He could have been here doing things that we do here in Texas, trying to do it.
Mhm. Yes.
What were the methods of communication that you had?
It began with a letter and correspondence, and then at that time they were in Huntsville. And so Gloria took a group of us up there and talked us through how you go and visit someone on death row, and kind of held our hands, took us up there. And from that, I just continued corresponding with him, and there was a lot of naivete on my part. I had no idea. I was teaching a workshop up in upstate New York, and I bought him all these art supplies and sent them to him. Well, they never got them. So I found out, that you can't, they're not allowed to have art. They're not allowed to draw. I mean, that was another thing that struck me was this, no matter how much they were repressed, you can't kill the human spirit. They figure out how to write to each other. They figure out how to communicate. They do this kiting where they would pass letters. I would mail him the manuscript of my play, and he would pass it along the way. So people along his pod, they call it a pod, would write me letters about the play. So it really moved me how they just desperate they are for life. And that was the theme of the play, is that the people on the outside, there's so many people on the outside who are dead. And here are these men facing death, and they're so alive. Now, of course, that kind of bothered some people that take on the play, because it was, I just made up this story, and they got very, kind of like what they were saying, they wanted to be more about the death penalty. But for me, it was more about, you could take a human being and lock him in a 9x12 room, which is what they are, but they're still alive, and they're alive until their last breath. And how many people are on the outside with so much freedom, and they're walking around and they're dead in their souls. So that was the take that I took.
I'll make sandwiches. My brother, he did 25 years on death row before they executed him. He was as live as anybody I knew. He learned how to handle with it, deal with it, and do
I don't eat sandwiches.
Yeah.
the resources he had.
I want to
He
eat
used
something
them.
expensive.
He was just always happy, smiling, and trying to help us out here.
And that's the amazing thing, yeah.
Go over there.
Yeah, that's the strength that it takes to endure that. That's one thing that I would think about Todd, is like, how does he endure it? How does anybody endure that? And to still come out and joke. And our visits, they were like 2 hours long, but they were just like these,
Did you ever talk to
almost
Big
like
Daniel?
fantasy moments of, he wasn't really in prison anymore. He said, and he talked about his family, we'd laugh, we'd joke, we'd tease. He would flirt, he's a handsome young man, and I just thought, that's their escape. Those 2 hours is their escape. Because they go back into this place, and he would transcribe what goes on, and there were people living next to him who clearly were losing it mentally, because he would kind of transcribe. And the human spirit is fragile, and it's amazing how they cannot kill it.
So do you have any plans of writing a memoir about your experience?
Yeah, every time I look at part of it, I think, oh, I could do this, and then I start. My goal is to finish it. I started it, and I went up to Vermont and started on it, but there's just this kind of unconscious block right now. So I'm kind of seeing the film kind of inspired me again. I thought, okay, just tell the journey, tell the narrative journey. So I don't know, but I've never, as a playwright, ever had a theater approach me and ask me to write something, and I was actually approached by Northwestern University Press. So if any of y'all are aspiring writers, how you think, well, if someone if only somebody wanted my work, I could do it. No, that's not true. You know, so yeah, I've just got to make myself do it. So.
How do you, I think I want to start writing to someone. What would you suggest? Like, hello, my name is.
Gloria
Like,
gave
how do
me
you
his
start?
name. Yeah, and I don't know if there are other organizations that do this, but you get the person's name, and I just wrote, and I was very honest. I said, I'm a writer, I'm against the death penalty, you know, I went on this protest march, and just, you know, straight up, and then I received the letter back from him, and there was such gratitude in this letter, you know, there's just like, oh, I'm, you know, so glad to hear from you, and it was very polite, and, but then, I mean, again, this is a human being. There were times when he could be bitchy and complaining, and also I was profoundly touched by, you know, his sense of humor and things. So you're getting on board of a relationship, and you know, what was also painful was going up there and seeing the families visiting. You know, you look down this road and you see these family members, the children and grandparents. I'll never forget, there was a young man who was from Grapeland, because my parents were from Grapeland, and he was on death row for being in a robbery where someone was shot and killed. And his father was the mayor of Grapeland, and his mother, and they would come in, and they were very middle class, and they would take the phone and they would wipe the phone off, you know, because, you know, hundreds of people are on these phones, and they would wipe the seat off, and just the love that they have for their son, and having to endure that, it's very tough at times. The first time I went out and visited on death row, I came home and I slept for 6 hours. It's very emotionally draining. And Gloria, my kudos to you. I don't know how you do it, because I've been approached by a woman she's asking for help with her son, and I told her, you know, honestly, back when I was a stand-up person, it was very hard emotionally and physically, and now I'm in a wheelchair. I said I'll try and do what I can, but be prepared. It's a tough journey. So thank you, Gloria, for what you do.
It's just funny to hear you say that, because I always thought that my brother was on death row for 7 years in Louisiana, and I have another brother who I've never met, but I've heard that he's serving a life sentence, and I can't bring myself back to ever just step foot on a prison yard ever again. I don't want to hear, you know, and it's kind of sad, you know, but after that journey, it's just emotionally draining.
And yeah, you can't go there. Yeah.
Because you're re-traumatizing yourselves when you go through that.
The searches.
Yeah, and you push a lot of that down while you're going through it, but your unconscious will surface, you know, and you have to take care of yourself. You have to journal and work on things, and that's exactly where I am right now. I'm debating how can I find someone to go to Louisiana and talk to this man, but knowing that it's like just taking a step off of the cliff, you know. So that's tough.
Any final questions? No, thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much.
Did you call